This is an interview with Robert Ikeda on June 10, 2000 at the Virginia Holocaust Museum in Richmond, Virginia. Could you please state your name, rank, and serial number?
Name, rank, and serial. Robert M. Ikeda. Let's see, I think I made T5. Serial number 36949459. I still remember that.
Which branch and division of the armed forces were you in?
I was in the Army.
What was your military occupation?
My MOS? I think I was considered a heavy machine gunner.
How long were you in the service?
I was in the service, I have to think about it, a year and a half.
Did you receive any military decorations?
A Good Conduct Medal, a Victory Medal, and Army of Occupation, and a European Campaign Ribbon.
How old were you when you entered the Army?
Must have been 19 when I entered the Army.
Could you explain the regiment that you were in the Army, the Nisei?
Yes, after basic training in Texas, we were assigned to the 442nd Nisei combat team. This is a unit of all Japanese Americans that consisted of a infantry unit, a battalion of engineers, and a battalion of artillery. So it was more or less an independent combat team. And this is the unit that I was attached to.
442nd.
442nd.
Okay. And that was the 522nd was part
there
of
was
that?
the artillery battalion that was attached to it was the 522nd Field Artillery Battalion. That was part of the combat team.
Was that the
that
part
was the
that
unit
you were
that
in?
I was with, yes.
Okay. Were you, did you volunteer or were you drafted?
I was drafted.
Did you see any irony in that at the time, since you had been in an internment camp?
Well, I tried to volunteer earlier after camp when I was in Chicago, but the only place they would take us would be into the unit. So I had to go into the 442nd. I don't think Americans were allowed into any other unit.
Were all men of draft age in the internment camps asked if they were willing to fight for America?
I think they were, yes. And there was a group of objections, people that rejected the Army, and were in, I think they were put into Leavenworth prison because of not going in the Army, protesting, yes.
Was that a general reaction or?
No, those are individual, and it seemed, depending on the camp you were in some relocation centers, they seemed to have, there must have been a leader in that had led some of the young men into protesting and being conscientious objectors. I don't remember that being in Gila.
Why did you want to volunteer?
Oh, I guess just everybody else was doing it. I think that's it, yes. Duty to the country.
Were your commanders also Japanese American?
No. I think we had one officer in our unit that was Japanese, and he was Lieutenant Sakamoto. All the rest were Caucasians.
Did you witness or experience any prejudice or discrimination from the Caucasian commanders?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Could you describe your Nisei unit?
Describe the Nisei?
What was your mission?
Oh, let's see. We were, I have to go back a ways. When I joined the unit, we were a replacement unit, and the 442nd were going back to, this was in Marseille, and the 442nd was in France. They had just fought the Lost Battalion, and we're going back to Italy. And when the replacement group that I was with arrived in Marseille, the artillery group had already been sent up to the German line because they needed the artillery unit for the crossing the Rhine. And we were attached to the artillery unit. So therefore, we were just if you excuse the expression, we were a bastard artillery unit. We were attached to any army or division that needed artillery support. So we were attached to a number of various divisions when I joined the unit. I think when I first joined, we were with the 4th Division at the time, and then we got transferred around. I think we ended up with 101st Airborne when we ended up in southern Bavaria.
How did you view having that mission, that you were assigned to different locations? Was it viewed negatively or positively?
No, I don't think I really was concerned about it. It was a task to do, and we were told to do it.
How much training did you have before you were sent overseas?
Well, I went through basic training in Camp Hood, Texas, and we were trained on an anti-tank gun, a 57 millimeter anti-tank gun in basic training. But I gather they found they were useless against the German tanks because the shells would bounce off of these Tiger tanks, so that they really weren't used, and therefore I think that's why we were attached to the artillery. It was the closest thing to the anti-tank training that we had.
Do you know the background of the soldiers that were in your unit, their education level?
No, I didn't. No. They were just Japanese Americans that were in the unit.
I've read that your unit had the highest education level, and that you had higher IQs than was required for officer training.
Okay.
And that you were considered an elite unit. Did you realize you were considered an elite unit?
Not till after the war, when some of the awards were presented, from what I...
Were most of the Nisei in the 442nd drafted or volunteer?
The initial unit was all volunteers. Wait, there was a 100th Battalion that was started before then, and they may have been initially drafted before the war. But all those that went in during the war were volunteers initially, yes. We may have been the first replacements that were drafted into the units.
What was the prevalent attitude of the Nisei toward having been interred and toward fighting for America?
A lot of the members of the unit were Hawaiians, and therefore they were not interned. But the others were on American and were interned, and I think they all had the idea that we had to prove ourselves by fighting for the U.S.
So that was your way of proving your loyalty?
Yes, I think so. At least that was my thing, that I had to serve, because I guess all the kids that I grew up had served, to my knowledge, yes.
Were your parents still in the relocation camp when you entered the Army, or had they left?
No, they were in Detroit at the time I was in, yes.
Did you experience any prejudice from other soldiers in other units?
I don't remember any. Oh, I remember we had a little bit more liberties than we did in training camp, in that we were allowed into both the colored PX and the white PX. We could go to either one and purchase things. That was the only thing I noticed.
Did your unit have a motto?
Go for broke.
Have you ever seen the movie titled Go for Broke?
Yes, I did see that movie.
Was it accurate?
As I remember, probably. I don't really remember it now.
Was there a soldier in the movie that was your position in the unit?
I don't think so. I was just a PFC.
Your battalion received numerous medals and citations after the war. What made the 442nd Battalion so effective?
I think they had a cause to prove. And I think because of that, they did things that were a little bit more courageous, dangerous than maybe other GIs would have done. They felt they had to prove a point, I think, was the reason for that.
How did your battalion work together?
It worked very well, to my knowledge. But we were replacements, and we were kind of excess men, because they really didn't have many casualties in the artillery. So therefore, when the replacements got there, I served just as a Royal Guard. We guarded the headquarters, was my duty in the unit.
In the movie Go for Broke, the Caucasian commander seemed resentful at first, taking a Japanese-American unit. Is that true?
I don't know.
In your unit, did you feel
no,
that with your commander?
I didn't feel that, no. Because by the time we had joined, the unit had been in combat for a long time.
It was already established.
Yes. I was a replacement very near the end of the war, so.
Okay. Could you describe your war experiences before you reached Dachau? What were you involved in?
We were in headquarters company, so we didn't have any guns. We were controlling the fire missions. And we were advancing probably every other day because the Germans were retreating so fast. So we put our guns into one place, and then within a couple of days we'd move forward. And then the one night I can remember, we were on a task force. We had to get down through Germany, and we had to, I guess, cross the Danube River. We were headed for Ulm. And we had a night mission that we were on. And I can remember that night because the anti-aircraft searchlights were shining on the low clouds, and therefore the entire area looked like it was daylight. And we were advancing along this front. And there were suddenly German soldiers up ahead with their hands up, and nobody would pick them up. We just went right by them, and they were on their own. We just ignored them because we had a mission to go on, and here's these German soldiers with their hands up, ready to surrender, but no one would pick them up to be surrendered. And we continued on down, and I guess we ended up close to Ulm on that force. But basically it was a matter of getting into position and then firing a few shells and moving on.
Were there ever any incidents where you were scared or fearful for your life?
Probably the one time when we were lost. We got ahead of our lines one day. This was a while. The infantry needed our trucks in order to move forward, so they had taken some of our trucks and moved forward, and they came back and picked us up. And therefore we started to go forward, and all of a sudden we got lost. We got into one town. You could tell towns that were surrendered because they had sheets hanging out their windows, so you knew this town was taken. And we got into this town, and it didn't have any sheets hanging out. And we go around the corner, and somebody said, "German soldiers." Oh, there were about 30 German soldiers in this town, but they were all ready to surrender. They had stacked their arms, thank goodness, and they were all ready to give up. So we got into there and found out that they were ready to surrender. So we put them on the trucks and brought them back to our lines. So
was this near the end of the war?
Yes, this was near the end of the war, yes. This was just south of Munich, if I remember. It was after we had passed Dachau and area. We were on our own, yes.
And about how many were in your battalion?
I have no idea. Our headquarters company had about 50, I would guess, yeah.
Was your unit part of the group who rescued the Lost Battalion of Texas in France? Could you describe that? Explain
the Lost
that.
Battalion?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I was not with the unit at the time.
Oh.
That was before I joined the unit.
When did you encounter Dachau concentration camp?
I don't know the exact date, but I know we were going along the road as we were advancing, and all of a sudden these very thin people were walking along the side of the road with these uniforms on, with these striped uniforms, and I asked, who are these people walking so long? This? Oh, they're political prisoners that were just released from the camp up ahead. And I guess they were released, they were walking along the side of the road, and they were escaping from Dachau, and we were advancing. And I didn't realize till after the war that our sea battery unit had actually opened the gates of Dachau. Because we had gone along the road. I guess some of the prisoners had gotten out because the German guards had left because the Americans were advancing. So they got out and they were walking along the side of the road. And there were rumors that we fed some of the prisoners that night. And some of them, according to the rumors, had died because they had eaten so much. Now, how valid that is, I have no idea. But that was the rumor around the unit that night when we ran into these Dachau prisoners that were walking along the side of the road.
Did you go into the camp?
I went into the camp after the war was over. Let's see, there was announcement made that if anybody wanted to go to Dachau, that they could go visit there. And also the Dachau trials were going on at that time. So I had volunteered, and that was the time I went into Dachau and saw the prison and the furnaces and stayed during some of the trial things that were going on during that time.
There were no prisoners there then when you visited the camp?
No, they were all gone at the time, yes.
What did you see when you went into the camp?
Barbed wire, the things, yes, and the ovens, and then these barrels of ashes that were from the scrapings out of the furnaces.
Were there any bodies remaining in the camp?
No, I did not see any bodies at the time. I think this was probably about a month later, so they had cleaned up all of it.
Did you attend the trials, Dachau trials?
The Dachau, yes, I did attend the trials there. Not the Nuremberg trial, but the Dachau trials. They were trying some of the guards at the prison that had mistreated the prisoners there.
Can you describe what you heard, what you experienced there?
No, I really don't remember. I remember sitting in the courtroom, and I remember the thing that all of the thing had to be translated from English to German and German back to English, so I could see where people could prepare for answers in order to answer these questions. And that's all I remember, sitting in the courtroom and listening to the discussions going on.
Do you remember detecting any remorse on the part of the guards?
No, I don't remember that remorse. I remember when we were around the area after the war, we had asked some of the civilians that lived around the camp what they thought of Dachau. And the thing is, they didn't know what was going on around in that camp, what was the explanation we were getting.
In speaking with the townspeople, in pleading ignorance, did they seem to show any remorse for what had happened there?
No, they didn't, not to my knowledge, no.
Did seeing the camp and seeing the prisoners as they were leaving, did that change your picture of the war at all while you were there fighting?
Well, I didn't visit the camp until the war was over. We did run into the prisoners during the war. And no, it really didn't make an impression on me at that time. Didn't realize it until really after I'd gotten back and realized what had gone on. Yes, at the time we saw them, they were just prisoners that were, they could be just criminal prisoners at the time. I didn't really know the background of these people.
So you had not been informed at all about the camps? You really weren't prepared for
No, we weren't prepared, no. All of a sudden they appeared on the road, and I didn't have any idea what was going on.
What other places did you visit after the war?
Oh, yes, I did visit Dachau, and I have some pictures that I had taken while I was there. Oh, I don't think I have those. I did visit Hitler's Eagle's Nest when the war was over, and I have some pictures of that one. This is the road that goes up to his place, and it's a kind of a switchback type of thing where you have to walk the way up. And I have mentioned that since I was not an officer, I had to walk up, and all officers got to ride the elevator up. And this is another picture of Hitler's Eagle's Nest that I had taken when we had taken a visit there. And as I mentioned, I had to walk up rather than take the elevator that was in there. But I gather the place had looted by the time we were there, and they had taken a lot of the silverware that had been there before during the war.
And what kind of a walk up to the house was it?
It's quite a steep walk up to the top. It was a hairpin back and forth up to the top. It was a very spectacular view from the top up there. Yes, it was.
And it's located where?
This is located in Berchtesgaden area in southern Germany, Bavaria area. This is where we ended up when the war ended. We ended up near the end of the war in this area.
What was remaining that you saw in Eagle's Nest?
Just the buildings. It was really not bombed at all. But the headquarters down below where the SS were assigned, that was quite bombed. There were a lot of bomb craters down there, and a lot of that was damaged. But not at the Eagle's Nest. I didn't see any damage up there at all.
Do you have any other pictures?
Yes, I have some other pictures of, this is one of Mr. Ito. We used to call him Crowd Ito because of this picture, because I guess he had liberated the flag and his helmet, and he's displaying it for us. And this shows a picture of him displaying all his souvenirs that he had collected. And this is the picture that I had taken with some of my friends at another unit in Heilbronn, Germany. This was after the war, and I had found out that he was not too far, so we took a cheap ride to visit him, and this is the picture.
And you're on the far left, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you think of any other experiences that you had during the war?
You
Good
caught
or
me.
bad?
That I could talk about. No, I didn't have all that glory. I was just a PFC and guarding the headquarters. Oh, rather interesting. One day we had a reporter from the Honolulu Star Bulletin visit us, and she was writing up the unit, and we had found out that she was going to stay overnight with us. So therefore, since being a Royal Guard, I was assigned to guard her during that night. They had posted us. The only trouble is they had given me a Thompson machine gun, which I had never had fired and never had used before. So I was protecting her with a Thompson that I had never used before. Anyhow, nothing happened, but I think that was an interesting incident that this lady reported to come, and they gave me a Thompson machine gun to protect her. And I had never handled a Thompson machine gun before that night.
What happened to the Nisei after the war ended?
After the war ended, we were, the 522nd had enough points that they can go back to the United States. The replacement, about 50 of us had joined them just after they had crossed the Rhine. So we were assigned to a 215 Salvage and Repair Company in Nuremberg, Germany. And we were stationed there, and then we were moved to Bamberg. But then, while I was still in the 522nd, this first sergeant asked if I would like to go to school. And sure, I can go to school and not have to do any duty. So I went to a kind of a college prep school in Freising, Germany. It was called Weihenstephan. It's a brewery school, a well-known brewery school in Germany. And I took things like chemistry and college chemistry. Rather interesting, our instructor for college for the organic chemistry was a PFC in the Armored Infantry. He had a PhD, worked at the Wood Institute, and he was serving as a PFC in the Armored Infantry, and he was teaching me organic chemistry, and I had the same rank that he did. And I'd taken, college chemistry, organic chemistry, and some physics. And when the war ended, I was separated from Fort Sheridan. And since I had not gotten my high school diploma, I took the GED exam, and I passed it. Since I had already taken organic, I passed it, and then went on to Berkeley for my bachelor's.
So when you returned, you did not have to go back to the internment camp?
No, it was all closed by then.
Were the Nisei soldiers ever given public recognition?
Yes, I think the unit went back to Washington, and they marched in Washington, yes.
And did President Truman present you with any honors?
Well, we stayed back. We were one of the ones that didn't get to come back to Washington because we didn't have enough time in service.
But he presented, was it the parade on Constitution Avenue?
I think it was, yes. Since I wasn't there, I can't talk about that one.
He presented the Distinguished Unit Citation during the parade. President Truman said, when he presented the Presidential Unit banner, "You fought not only the enemy, but prejudice, and you won." Do you agree with that statement?
I agree with that statement. That was probably why they had fought so well.
How was the unit received when you returned to the United States?
I don't know, because I didn't come back with the unit. I came back as a replacement.
As an individual
As
then?
an individual.
How were you received?
Don't remember any prejudice because I got out, they separated me in Fort Sheridan, and I went out to Berkeley to go to school. And I had my uniform on, and of course I had, I don't know, ruptured duck. They called it the ruptured duck. It was insignia that placed on your uniform to tell that you were discharged, and it was a thing that was called a ruptured duck. So I had a ruptured duck on my uniform. They knew that I had served and was going back to California.
Was your unit given a nickname?
I don't remember what.
Were you aware of the great accomplishments that your battalion achieved before the war ended?
Yes, I had heard about the unit, the Lost Battalion. I think this was pretty well known among the Japanese people. The 442nd was well known.
Are you aware of how many thousands of medals and citations?
Yes, quite a few, yes.
18,143 medals and citations. And that your unit also suffered more casualties than any other unit of a similar size and length of service?
I've heard that, yes, I've heard that. Yes, I have friends that have died, kids that I've grown up with that have died in the war.
Were there people in your unit that you knew before going overseas?
No, but while I was in Marseille and as in formation, I see my uncle walking across the field while I was in formation there, and I hollered at him and he recognized me, yes.
Did you get to talk to
Yes,
him at all?
he was in the original unit, and yes, he was in the Lost Battalion. He also was in the invasion of southern France. He was in the glider invasion into southern France. The anti-tank company was reassigned, and they went in on a glider into the southern France invasion.
Do you know, after families left the internment camps, were they given any assistance to reintegrate into American life?
No. I've heard some stories about some of the people that went back to California that they couldn't find housing when they got back there. They lived in tents. In fact, I gather the conditions may have been even worse than in the internment camp when they went back to California.
You did not, and your parents did not return to California.
No.
So I know you can't address this personally, but did you hear of any acts of kindness or remorse by former neighbors who maybe had prejudice feelings before your neighbors were sent to the camps?
No, but I do remember an incident in my grandfather's community where when they were going back, that there was some prejudice to them for returning back to Tracy. They didn't want them back.
But your grandparents chose,
Yeah, they
grandfather
did
chose
go
to
back.
stay.
Yes, they did go back to Tracy.
Was any reparation offered?
Yes. I did get my reparation of what, $20,000. My wife and I both received the $20,000 signed by President Reagan, was it? And we have an apology letter in my file.
So it was many years later.
Yes, that was many years later.
Did you have to prove your losses?
No, not in this case. I guess my parents did, right after the war, they did have a repatriation. And I gather they didn't get much for what they lost.
Were you able to retain pride in your Japanese heritage?
I think so, yes.
Did you retain any customs or traditions that you had before the war?
I don't have that many customs or things that I have. Yes.
Did you have any problems after returning after the war, starting over again?
Not really, because when I came back, I went back to the university. So I went to Cal to go to college on my GI Bill. Thank goodness for the GI Bill. So I got an education on the GI Bill.
So you felt like you were reintegrated,
Yes.
no problem?
No problem.
Did you know that documents show that there was never a single act of Japanese-American disloyalty or sabotage during the entire war?
I've heard that, yes.
How did life after internment differ from life before the internment? Was it better or worse?
Well, I think it was much better, although, as I say, we were at an age when we enjoyed ourselves. We were a kid growing up in college. But the thing that I didn't realize when I got my degree and looking for a job, that a lot of the Niseis that had graduated college before the war could not get jobs in their profession, like as a chemist or any doctors and dentists and things with their own could get jobs. But people in the other areas, like business areas, getting a degree, could not get a job. And I gather, I kind of felt that when I was looking for a job after I got my degree, that I couldn't get into private industry. I noticed I was turned down by most applicants, but I did get a job with the government. Right? Or people that, the Niseis that were getting jobs in universities or governments and not in private industries. And as I say, before the war, the people that had gotten their degrees couldn't get a job, so some of them went back to Japan in order to use their education.
How did your internment in the relocation camp and your experience in the Nisei unit affect your life?
Oh. I think probably I integrated much more easily with the U.S. things, I think, because I got my GI Bill and therefore went to college and then got into profession. And I think the war had scattered the Japanese such that they integrated into the community much better than if we had not. I think a lot of us would have stayed in California and stayed within a group, but I'm not sure. That's only my own feeling on that. Yes.
Do you feel it affected your self-image in any way?
No, I don't think so. Oh, in a way. Sometimes I'm kind of proud that I served in the 442, and I do mention it occasionally, that I did serve in that unit. Yes, I'm proud of that unit.
Have you returned to Dachau concentration camp since the war?
No, I have not. We did go to Germany, but I didn't go to Dachau again, no.
Have you returned to the internment camp?
Yes, we did go back to the internment camps. We had these reunions every once in a while, and they had one in Phoenix, and they had a reunion there, and I think there were 44 buses that went out to camp. And I found the place where our house was, because our neighbor boy had dug himself a basement under his barrack, and therefore there was a big hole in the ground, so I could say, yes, we live right next to the hole in the ground, and this was where our unit was. The foundations are left there. There's still the slab where the bathrooms were, and where the laundry, and some of the foundations for the units. And as I say, some of these fish ponds that some of the older generation had made are still there.
So the camp had been dismantled?
Yes, the camp has been dismantled and kind of abandoned. It's still there. I guess some of the other camps have gotten in and they've been homesteaded, like Wyoming has been homesteaded, so there are now farms there. But Gila is just there. Yes, it's been abandoned. It's part of the Indian reservation.
How did it feel to return?
Oh, yeah. It was rather interesting. It's a feeling, oh, gee, I was here, yeah. And I can remember the days and, gee, am I going to be here the rest of my life? Yes, and here I went back to that same place.
Was it an emotional time?
No, not really, yeah. Just a feeling, and oh, yes, this is where I spent a few years.
Did you see different reactions from different people?
No, there weren't that many. Yeah, we went kind of spread out individually to where we lived, so we weren't that much as a group, no.
Interesting. If you have not already shared your most vivid memory of the war, could you describe it?
Most vivid memory. I'd say it was the first day when I got attached to the unit, and I heard all this rumbling in the background, like thunder and lightning. And I said, what's that? And I found out those were all artillery shells that were being exploded, and the explosions out in the distance I could hear, they sounded like thunder. and lightning in the background, and this was all the shelling, and that really impressed me. That this was the first day I got attached to the 522nd, and this is what I heard.
How many places did your unit go? Were you in Germany and France? Or
No, just Germany.
Just
yeah.
Germany.
We just stayed in Germany. Yes, we had replaced them after they had crossed the Rhine. So we crossed the Rhine as a replacement on pontoon boats, or pontoon bridges, and then caught the unit, and then we went all the way down to southern Germany, as I say.
Did you ever have any trouble separating your feelings for Nazis from your feelings about German people?
I haven't considered that.
How did your war experience change your life?
Oh, probably because I got the GI Bill of Rights and went to college.
Another positive.
Yes, very positive, yes.
How has the experience affected your worldview of politics and religion?
Oh, yes, I think it has. I have a lot more concerns about these ethnic things that's going on right now, and people killing each other and doing things, and the things that happened to the Jews in Germany really realize that these things still can occur, yes.
Have you shared this information with others during your lifetime?
Not really like sitting down and talking to you, no. I've tried to sometimes sit down and put some of my experience into my word processor, but I really haven't proceeded very far on it, yes.
What was the response of your relatives when you returned and told them about your experiences?
Well, I had other relatives, you know, like my uncle that had gone to, so really I didn't have that much to talk about, you know. Really, we didn't talk about that much. Occasionally the subject would come up and we'd discuss it. Tom and I were in the 442, and I saw him in Marseille and things like that, but other than that, I don't think we discussed that very much. I guess in some of the reunions we kind of talk about what we did in camp and kind of reminisce of what had occurred in camp and things like that, but I guess that's what the reunions are good for.
What insight did you learn that you can pass on to those who were not there?
Of my experience of internment and Army?
Either or both?
Either or both. There are other people in the world that should be treated much better than they are.
What one lesson do you think we should learn from remembering World War II?
What I just said. Seeing those prisoners walking along the side of the road was oh.
Have you ever tried to explain to children what happened?
Occasionally I've talked to them about it, not very much. That was something that this last reunion said. There was a lady that did all the congressional hearings for the redress, and he says, talk to your kids, explain them what happened, yes. Take some time and tell them what your feelings were about your experiences.
How do you answer people who would say that it never happened?
Oh. Excuse the expression, bullshit.
Do you have any last memory that you would like to share?
No, I think I mentioned them as I go along, yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your memories, your experiences.
Thanks. Thank you for inviting me here. It's rather interesting in recalling some of these things that I had experienced, yes?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. It was an interesting experience.